Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I'm still awake, still puttering about. I saw this and I wanted to respond to this before I turn in and get some rest. Okay, good, sound is right. So Sargon of Akkad, or Akkad, I may be pronouncing his name wrong, but Sargon of Akkad. Sargon of Akkad did a hit piece or a hit video on Alexandria Ocassio-Cortez and the Democratic Socialists of America. Now, I've only seen maybe one or two of his other videos, so I don't fully know his political leanings. I saw him making a bunch of bad, ill-informed arguments in one of his other videos, and he carries on that ignoble tradition into this one. The weird part about this is I'm not a socialist, so I'm not necessarily going to defend socialism. There's somebody else or some of the socialists that can defend that. I will, however, defend Ocasio-Cortez, because this is somewhat of a ludicrous straw manning, like a profound straw manning with a jetpack where they inject themselves with heroin and cocaine and steroids. I'm trying to get across on how ridiculous and preposterous a lot of this video is, because even though he says it's about her, it's not about her. He comes up with a standard and then attacks the standard. It's as if he saw Ocasio-Cortez's star rising. He's like, oh, wow, I want to get in on some of that action. What can I hit her on? Hey, I'll just create a standard by which to tag her with. You'll see what I mean. I'm going to show the video. The first 6-7 minutes of the video, I grant him. Granted, I grant you all of it. Every last bit of it up till the point where I'm starting this video, which is about 6-7 minutes in. And in that, he's just talking about Bernie Sanders. He's talking about how Bernie Sanders calls himself a socialist, but Bernie Sanders is not really a socialist. He's for the most part just a Democrat, or a classic Democrat, like a FDR-style Democrat. Even going so far as to say Noam Chomsky is kind of getting across that Bernie Sanders is not a socialist and not that radical. And even pointing out that the right-wing government in Denmark told Bernie Sanders to stop calling us a socialist country. We're a capitalist country that is effectively a welfare state, which is make sure people are covered. So keep that in your head as you watch that video, because I kind of want to come back to that as we go through this. This is a ludicrous video. All right, let's take a look at it. Sargon of Akkad. Now look, he comes across as dickish in this video, only because when he's talking about the DSA, he's smiling and laughing. You can hear it in his voice when he's saying it. Now, part of the dickishness is he's British. I don't hold that part against him. I hold the dickishness against him. Because ultimately, look, I think capitalism is somewhat of a ridiculous system, that you can evolve past that particular system. However, when I'm talking to capitalists, I don't necessarily talk to them from the standpoint of they're fucking idiots. And personally, I don't necessarily think you should go with that route with this either. But whatever. Maybe when I'm talking to libertarians, I can be pricks. I can be a prick also. So fair enough. But Sargon of Akkad, making a ridiculous argument, swinging at ghosts, don't exist.
What does it mean to Alexandria Ocassio-Cortez to be a member of the Democratic Socialists of America? Well, they describe themselves as socialists. Like most socialist organizations, DSA believes in the abolition of capitalism in favor of an economy run by either the workers or the state, though the exact specifics of abolishing capitalism are fiercely debated by socialists, as in, they don't know, and they can't agree, and there will never be an agreement on this.
They don't know, they don't agree, and there will never, in the grand expanse of time, ever be an agreement on this. You know, he acts as if that's a bad thing. Why on earth would you have, I don't know, any system where everybody is in lockstep agreement on exactly all the details of that particular system? Of course you're going to have argument. You have a capitalist political system in our country, a capitalist economic system, but it folds itself into the political system. You have two parties, Democratic Party, Republican Party. I would say they're two wings of the same party, but for the most part, they don't agree. They don't agree on the level of state intervention into the economy itself. You have some that want more state intervention, others that want less. They don't agree. You have some people who say, hey, the government should be able to supply jobs for people who need jobs. You have other people who say, oh my God, that's too much socialism into a society. Now, granted, they would use that term in a particular way, but I'm trying to make this point that disagreement is not bad. Disagreement is just life. People are going to disagree on what they believe, or the limits, or the extent to which they believe a particular system won't work, how it's interpreted, what it means. Macron, if I'm not mistaken, Macron is a socialist, technically. He's out there attacking workers. Just because somebody calls himself something doesn't necessarily mean that those people are stuck intensely to a particular narrative. And not just stuck potentially to a narrative, it doesn't mean they're all in lockstep agreement on all of the tenets. Yes, they disagree. Of course they're going to disagree. They're human beings. It doesn't make sense. It's just a weird argument to say that's a negative. That's all. It's not a negative or positive. It just is. It's called being a human being. Let's keep going.
In practice, that means that DSA members advocate ending private ownership of a wide range of industries whose products are viewed as necessities, which they say should not be left to those seeking to turn a profit. According to the DSA's current mission statement, the government should ensure that all citizens receive adequate food, housing, healthcare, childcare, and education. DSA also believes that the government should democratize private businesses, i.e. force owners to give workers control to them to the greatest extent possible. And this is reflected in Cortez's desire to give everyone a job working for the government if they can't find one for themselves, which becomes increasingly likely if the government starts seizing the means of production. The DSA members also say that overthrowing...
Let me go to that one first. He's talking about a federal jobs guarantee, meaning if private enterprise is incapable or doesn't necessarily want to, well, let's say incapable. If they're incapable of providing jobs for the people of the society, yeah, the government is you could say the job distributor of last resort. I see nothing wrong with that issue. I have no idea why that's an insane idea. It's just a job guarantee. Ultimately, you have a situation where the question becomes, how do you get rid of poverty in your society? And of course, there's not going to be a situation where every last person is going to be able to get a job from private enterprise. Private enterprise does not give people jobs for societal benefit. It gives people jobs because it needs a job done, if that makes sense. The government has a different modus operandi. Yeah, we have a program right now. It's called the military. And for all intents and purposes, we spend, nearly $1 trillion on the military. What about cutting that military in half, taking part of that money, I think it was about $230,000 was the analysis, and create a jobs program to make sure that the people of your particular society have jobs? Now, there are several benefits to this. Part of that is raising the standards of the other jobs in your society. And now, I understand that capitalists hate this idea because they don't want anybody competing with their ability to essentially, you could say, control the means of production. But I don't hate that idea at all. I love that idea. If you're serious about getting rid of poverty, be serious about getting rid of poverty. That's one of the main things. Republicans continuously talk about this thing of we want to have the dignity of work. Great. I want people to have the dignity of work too. And if the private employers are incapable of providing that for the employees, the government of last resort. Let's go back to the FDR days. I see nothing wrong with that. As for the other part, this idea of companies do things purely for the sake of profit. And so for vital services, those services should be in the hands of either state or worker control. Look, I haven't heard Ocasio-Cortez say that. But regardless of whether she said that or not, I actually agree with that. I mean, think of the oil companies. A perfect example, great example. I think it was in the 80s. ExxonMobil did experiments and they found out that their product, what they were doing, pulling stuff out of the ground, pumping it into the sky in order to create the vital resource of electricity or oil, gas, electricity, power. that it was causing climate change. It was a driver of climate change, that it was destabilizing the climate around the planet. Now, what did ExxonMobil do when they got this information? They were good capitalists, and they buried that report. At some point, they started treating climate change as if it was like cigarettes, and they started to attack the science itself in order to say, hey, it's hazy, it's hazy, it's hazy. We don't necessarily know. This is just their opinion. It wasn't their opinion. This was a matter of science. Now, from the standpoint of science, this is physical matter reality. This is not esoteric stuff. We're not talking about the stars and, spirit and all this other stuff. We're talking about physical matter reality. The people who build boats, bombs, ships, who tell us about the stars, explain our world to us. They're saying that we are destabilizing our environment based upon the things that we're doing on this planet. And the effects will be felt by us in our lifetimes. We're feeling them now. That is mainstream thought. This is not something that's on the wings. What is on the wings is the 1% or 2% of people who, for the most part, or scientists, that disagree with that. The overwhelming majority of scientists agree with that particular assessment. I say that to say ExxonMobil cared more about their individual private profit as opposed to the societal impact of what was taking place. And a 1% that was able to maximize their profit at the expense of everyone else, well, that's somewhat problematic. The Democratic Socialists of America, or socialists, if you want to call it that way, look at this and say, hey, maybe that shouldn't be that way. Maybe profit shouldn't be the main goal of that particular company. Maximizing their profit at the expense of the rest of the world shouldn't be their goal. Maybe that should not necessarily be in their hands. Now, whether you come up with various plans on how you want to pull that off, I don't necessarily disagree with that line of thinking. I don't even think that line of thinking is crazy. But let's keep going. I never heard Ocasio-Cortez say that, though. So let's put a pin in that, because that's important. Let's keep going.
Capitalism must include the eradication of hierarchical systems that lie beyond the market as well. As a result, DSA supports the missions of Black Lives Matter, gay and lesbian rights, and environmentalism as integral parts of this broader anti-capitalist program. And does Ocasio-Cortez believe that the world is run by a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy that is undoubtedly highly misogynistic? Of course she does.
I've seen on Twitter quite a bit talking about misogyny being a problem within the party and within some politics in general. Did you experience sexism during this campaign?
Duh. Of course.
Socialism is about democratizing the family to get rid of patriarchal relations, democratizing the political sphere to get genuine participatory democracy, democratizing the schools by challenging the hierarchical relationship between the teachers of the school and the students of the school, and socialism is the democratization of all areas of life, including but not limited to the economy.
One thing on the sexism or the matriarchal thing. Look, I'm not a socialist. I'm not anything. I don't consider myself anything. I don't like having this thing of having to defend a particular standard or that particular standard. I consider myself more of a humanist, and I stay there. That said, I understand there is no such thing as an objective point of view. What I mean by that is, me, as an African-American male, growing up in this particular society, in this particular time frame, have a particular disposition brought about by the experiences to which I've had in this life. Depending upon my experiences, I am going to be a particular way. Meaning, if some of my experiences have put me on somewhat of a hair trigger to maybe feel, let's say, oversensitive to race or very acute to this idea of either race or gender or sexuality or something to that effect, the person's not wrong for it. It's borne out just by their experiences. This is important to understand. This idea of somebody looking at this and saying, oh, this is comical that these people look at this society and say that this is a hierarchical society. From their disposition, yes. Now, you may not necessarily care about that, but they're not necessarily wrong, nor are you an objective observer any more than they're an objective observer. They're just subjective, just like everybody else is in this equation. My point to this is you're going to have people with different dispositions all across the scale who look at these things in different ways. And some people are going to be more sensitive to areas of either misogyny or racism or whatever. And in some cases, yeah, they may jump the gun into something that's not necessarily race or something that's not necessarily sex. But just understand that stuff sometimes is born out by their experiences, not because they just wanted to be oversensitive. I don't think it's funny. I guess that's my point. That's the thing that annoys me about this. It's an appraisal of something that is not wrong in any of the word. I guess that's what I'm saying. It's not wrong. It's just, it's a difference of opinion, but I don't understand the dickishness associated with the laughing in the explanation of whatever this is. And by the way, we don't know how far this rabbit hole goes. So I'm putting a pin in this just from the standpoint of Democratic Socialists of America. I know I've said I'm not doing this to defend socialism. I'm just saying some of the stuff, it's a weird way of talking about it that's being somewhat derisive that I don't particularly like. But let's keep going. We're almost done.
Intersectional socialism, if you will. And this is an organization, though not a political party, that Ocasio-Cortez is a part of. Now, naturally, her platform is not as radical as this, but
stop right there. What do you mean? You've just given me an entire list of items that you say were associated with the Democratic Socialists of America. In fact, I'll help you out. Let's pull up the page. This is the Vox article that he's using for this. All right. Written by some guy named Jeff Stein, okay, of Democratic Socialists of America. That's not written by Ocasio-Cortez. And ultimately, you just stopped right here and said, naturally, her platform is not as radical as this. Okay, so how radical is she? How do you know that she's associated with all of these items? Like, just because she calls herself a democratic socialist doesn't necessarily mean that she's lining up with each and every one of the items to which you've just attributed to her. You've read down a list of items as if these are somehow emblematic of who she is. Right off the bat, when you started this video, you pointed out Bernie Sanders, and you said Bernie Sanders wasn't a socialist. Great, I agree with you. You said Bernie Sanders, for the most part, was a classic Democrat. Again, I agree with you. Chomsky, you made the point for Chomsky. Why is it that you're okay with Bernie Sanders calling himself something that he's not? Not necessarily okay with it, but you recognize that Bernie Sanders is calling himself a socialist, even though he's not a socialist. But you're attributing each and every item that some guy wrote down that supposedly represents Democratic Socialists of America to Ocasio-Cortez. I guess the point I'm making to you is, if you acknowledge that Bernie Sanders is calling himself a socialist and he's not really a socialist based on what a socialist would actually be, but you attribute each and every quality to Ocasio-Cortez, even though many of these things are not in her platform at all. How are you attributing things to her that are not in her platform that she hasn't stated? What are you using to get across that these are the things that she believed in, as opposed to these are the things that somebody wrote down that was attributable, that this guy said was attributable to DSAs? How are you making the leap from one to the other and saying that this is emblematic of her when the only thing you have from her is her platform? That's what I'm getting at. It's one thing if she said, yes, I am all of these things, this is what I am, yes, full-throated, but that's not what happened. You made a leap, buddy. You took what Jeff Stein wrote down and said, because she called herself a democratic socialist, that this stuff applies to her. While at the same token recognizing that Bernie Sanders was calling himself something that he wasn't. There are socialists, real socialists, that put a knife in her saying that she's not a real socialist. I'm trying to get this point across to you that just because somebody wrote something down that says these are the things that are associated with the democratic socialist doesn't necessarily mean that she lines up with each and every one of those items any more than somebody writing down what is a Democrat and having all Democrats line up with all of the items that are associated with the person wrote down for Democrats. Certainly there's a difference between Chuck Schumer, Tulsi Gabbard, Nancy Pelosi, and who's the other one? Elizabeth Warren. These people are different. Their range, their politics, to some degree, are different. And yet, for whatever reason, maybe you just wanted to make a video about Ocasio-Cortez, get some of that, rub yourself in some of that Ocasio. You attribute all of the qualities to her. Or at the very least, you read them out as if they're attributable to her. I looked up, and let me let you play the last part. Let me play the last part because this last part is great. Because I love the leap of the shark, or the jump of the shark in this last part.
But this is the goal that she is working towards.
I don't compromise my values, but I'm certainly willing to compromise to get things done. You know, if I have to make compromises to improve in the direction of improving our healthcare, I'm happy to. If I have to make compromises in terms of improving our educational system, I'm happy to do those things. But I will not compromise on a vision, and I will not compromise on the goal, and I will not compromise on the future that I think is best for this country.
From that, I'm supposed to get the point that you're making, that's within her. Like the things that you read out for the Democratic Socialists of America, that's deep in her. There's a raging socialist waiting to get out behind those doe eyes, just raging and foaming at the mouth, trying to get his hands on people's property and money. But you don't know that. You don't know that at all. I'm trying to get this point across. You admitted early on that there were arguments with regards to this idea of socialism and how to bring it about and all this other stuff and what it means. You admitted that Bernie Sanders calls himself a socialist. He's not really a socialist. Even in America, you have libertarians. Everywhere else, libertarians are left-wingers. In America, they're fucking maniacs. But in this particular case, for whatever reason, all of the attributes you attribute to her. I looked up to see if I could find anywhere where she herself was talking about what she means by democratic socialists. Because this is Jeff Stein writing this. And based on what you said yourself, people have different ideas on what democratic socialists mean. And just like anything else in real world, if somebody said they're a Christian, they may still have sex on Sundays. I'm trying to make the point that just because somebody calls themselves something doesn't necessarily mean they live up to each and every one of the tenets. And the tenets that she put forth is her platform. And I've heard nothing else that goes beyond the platform. Just saying. Even in this document, there was a part on this right here. But the DSA is not a formal political party. Rather, it claims to be the largest socialist organization in America that tries to work within the Democratic Party to weaken capitalism, not end it. Not end it. This is in his own document. At the very least, the document he put up. The only thing I could find was this. And this was June 29th, 2018. Not the only thing, there was others, but she describes what she means by socialism or democratic socialism. Let's open another page.
Well, we've been talking about on the show, I believe there's a fracture in the Democratic Party, and you consider yourself a democratic socialist like Bernie Sanders, correct? Nancy Pelosi was asked about you, and she didn't exactly give you a ringing endorsement. Yeah. I mean, and you didn't exactly give her a ringing endorsement. Do you think that the future of the Democratic Party is socialism?
Well, first of all, there's a huge difference between socialism and democratic socialism. Democratic socialism, and really what that boils down to me, is the basic belief that I believe that in a moral and wealthy America, in a moral and modern America, no person should be too poor to live in this country. That's what I believe. And so I think I can understand that there may be some divisions. You know, I don't think people wake up in the morning and say, I'm a capitalist, you know? And so it's funny that when I win, this is the word that's always so thrown around.
I think Donald Trump wakes up with that exact word.
Yeah, I mean, he may.
But do you think the future of the party is more Bernie than Nancy?
I think that, you know, I think that for young people, I think the future, here's what I think. I think the future of the party is working class. And I think that what I represent, and perhaps, you know, Senator Sanders, also Senator Warren, there's a lot of working class champions in the Democratic Party. And I do think that that's the future.
But they distort the word socialism all the time.
Well, I think we should probably.
That sounded like Sweden or Denmark. I mean, honestly, it sounds like she's talking about a welfare state. Now, you can say that behind that beautiful facade, is a raging socialist waiting to get out, and she just doesn't want to share her values, and she's just trying to keep it in, and she's trying to hide it because she doesn't want people to know that there's a raging socialist, or she's using the term DSA to describe what she would consider to be a welfare state under a certain understanding in her mind of socialism. Like, I guess my point is, you don't know how far she goes into that rabbit hole of socialism. You don't. It's a massive jump over shark to even go from, here's what people say about socialism, here's what the guy in Vox says, which I grant you is probably true. My issue here is that you have no idea how she lines up with this, because I haven't heard her say how she lines up with this. And the most that I've heard her use is her platform, which I suspect is all you have also, because otherwise you would have had her saying something to give her more incriminating, not incriminating, but pushing her more in that line of thought. Let him finish.
And in case you feel that for some reason...
I love this part. He's putting his hand on his head like he's making a point. He's not really making a point. He's making a point against somebody, but not necessarily her, because he hasn't necessarily designated that what he's talking about applies to her. That's my issue with this. It's like if I say all Democrats are X. Well, what are all Democrats like? I have no idea what democratic values are. By the same token, if somebody wrote them down, they wouldn't necessarily apply to each and every person who calls himself a Democrat. There would be drift, and not everybody would ascribe to all of the tenets. This is kind of what I'm getting at. He has nothing that shows that she ascribed to all of these tenets. He just has the tenets themselves. And he is making a straw man of her as if she abides by all of these things. There's a raging socialist waiting to get out. And Psychic Sargon knows it.
Vox would be misrepresenting the Democratic Socialists of America. This is from their own website. Social ownership could take many forms, such as worker-owned cooperatives, publicly owned enterprises managed by workers and consumer representatives. Democratic Socialists favor as much decentralization as possible, while the large concentrations of capital in industries such as energy and steel may necessitate some form of state ownership. Many consumer goods industries might best be run as cooperatives. And of course, there are no models of democratic socialism, at least none that they are willing to claim, although they will claim Sweden's welfare state, Canada's national healthcare system, and France's nationwide childcare program, despite all of these being capitalist countries and at best social democracies. There is of course a democratic socialist country that they've left off of this list, perhaps because in this country the price of coffee has reached 1 million bolivars per cup, and that is of course Venezuela. Venezuela is a fantastic model of what will happen to a country with democratic socialism.
Venezuela is an excellent example of a country, of what happens to a country with democratic socialism, with another larger country waging economic warfare on the country that is going into democratic socialism. And I don't even know if it's democratic socialism. It's more, we've been waging economic war on Venezuela. It is not as if it's a country that's in a box by itself. That's my point. Let's keep going. I'm not going to dwell on Venezuela because my goal is not to defend capitalism or socialism. My point in this doesn't change. Ultimately, the person that he's talking about doesn't really apply here because these things don't really apply to her, or at the very least, he has no idea how many of these items apply to her. It's very possible that the list that she gave of the things that she wanted to do and the things that she wanted to accomplish is her mind of, this is my brand of socialism. Now, you may say that's not really being socialist, and World Socialist website will say that's not really being a socialist, but whatever. Americans have a tendency to call themselves things that they are not necessarily are. So Bernie Sanders is a socialist. She calls himself her DSA, and libertarians call themselves libertarians as opposed to batshit crazy. Let's keep going.
Because capitalism requires a strong market economy and strong property rights. The purpose of democratic socialism is to, little by little, start appropriating property, violating the property rights of the owners, and annexing this property to the state under the mistaken impression that the business is requisitioned will remain as productive as they are in private hands. I'll leave a link in the description to a video I've done about Venezuela that goes into this in great detail. Put simply, it won't, and it will encourage all manner of corruption. And yes, as Vladimir Lenin said, the goal of socialism is communism.
So, yes and no. I mean, this is kind of right, somewhat wrong. Yes, socialism is an intermediary between communism. It's like a holding pattern. So yes, that's true. Getting private property in state hands, that's not necessarily true. I mean, as you put before, as he put earlier in the video, there are arguments about an evolution to some degree from the standpoint of what people would consider to be communism. I'm not even a goddamn communist, and I know that much. But there are arguments about what's right from the standpoint of socialism. And even when he's talking about state controlling the means in this case, that's not even always the thing. You may have a collective, in which case you're talking about worker co-ops, not necessarily the state appropriating the property itself. But again, I don't want to defend socialism. I find these arguments, someone is saying it's just
which is why the Democratic Socialists of America happen to think that communism is a good idea. It should come as no surprise. And so you may be asking yourself, well, what happened to Bernie Sanders then? What happened to his more modern...
Again, just to be clear, this doesn't apply. This entire video, most of this video, half of this video is chasing ghosts. It's chasing ghosts. He is not pinned down Ocasio-Cortez on these items. He's creating a straw man, and he's attacked the straw man. At no point did he have her saying anything. You have no clip, no video of her saying any of this stuff, so he can narrow her down on this. She's assiduously stuck to her platform. This video is chasing ghosts. Don't get me wrong, well produced, but bunk.
Moderate social democrat vision for America instead of the far left's democratic socialist view of the United States. Well, put simply, the Abolish ICE movement happened. What began as a tweet has snowballed into a movement supported by major Democratic politicians now to abolish immigrations and customs enforcement because these people are, broadly speaking, anti-borders, which is precisely what The Hill has recognized when they cry, abolish ICE.
Again, we're back at this thing of, how do you know that's what she means? How do you know? How do you know? Has she said, I want to get rid of borders? When I say abolish ICE, I am specific to abolish ICE. We had an immigration system before that. George Bush, after 9/11, dragged immigration and dropped immigration under Homeland Security. Well, now you have immigration that is under, as if it's a threat in somehow. It doesn't have to be there. You act as if something that's there has to always persist, meaning the very act that something is created and something is there and something is in existence has to always be in existence. It's nonsense. In the same way it was created, it could be unraveled. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some people who mean open borders when they say this. I'm saying I'm not one of them. And I'm saying you have nothing showing Ocasio-Cortez says she wants open borders. Look, when Hillary Clinton was running in the race, and Hillary Clinton, people would say, she's going to sign the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And they're like, well, why do you think she's going to do that? Because she said it 40-something times. That's why I think it. Well, she says she's not going to do it. Yeah, but she said it 40-something times. My thinking that she's going to do it is coming from something that she's previously said. If I say she's going to put a missile defense shield in Syria, it's because she said she was going to put a missile defense shield in Syria. If I think she's a courtier for Wall Street, it's partially because she was hiding the speeches, but once at the point where you see the speeches, you can see where her head was at. I'm trying to make the point that my thinking that something was going on with Clinton from the standpoint of these other items was because of something she said or something she did to get that across. In this very specific case, you've grabbed essentially a bumper sticker of the Democratic Socialists of America, and you've attached that to Ocasio-Cortez. And I understand she calls herself that. But again, just because you call yourself something doesn't necessarily mean you ascribe to all of the tenets. If somebody says they're a Christian, doesn't necessarily mean they believe in all of the tenets of Christianity or that they even go to church. You have some people who just call themselves Christians in this kind of weird cultural way. The same thing is true with political parties. Somebody that's a Republican doesn't necessarily ascribe to all the tenets. Somebody that's a Green or Democrat doesn't always ascribe to all of the tenets. What I would need from you in order to make this case is to hear her saying, I ascribe to these particular tenets. Short of that, what you have is a video of you swinging at ghosts. Swinging at ghosts. I'm sure this is a good argument against somebody, just not her. Just not her. I'm putting the video at the bottom. I agree with you that there are some people out there who are looking for open borders. I'm not one of them. And in not being one of them, I haven't heard Ocasio-Cortez say anything about that. She's just abolish ICE. Yes, there are some people who say abolish ICE and they mean get rid of borders. But you're not talking about everyone. You're talking about her specifically in this particular video. It's called, what is it, Red Scare or Red something, talking about her? Yeah, Red Cortez. This video is about her. It's about her supposed political philosophy that you can divine through your psychic powers. I need something a little bit more than your word. That's all. I need you actually pointing to something that she is saying that is getting across the things that you are saying about the Democratic Socialists of America. Short of that, this is just the argument against the DSA. This is not an argument against Ocasio. So I'll leave it here. Both the videos are at the bottom and the links are at the bottom. By the way, one of the arguments that he makes is that this is going to crater Democratic chances. Democrats, you probably don't live in this country, so I don't necessarily know how aware you are of American politics. But they've lost 1,100 seats all throughout the United States. House, Senate, Supreme Court, President. They were so weak, they couldn't even get their own person in for the Supreme Court. And you're saying that them moving to the left is somehow going to crater their chances worse than the cratering and almost dissolution of the party as it is now. Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. I totally believe you on that. Now, here's the other thing. This is one of the polls dealing with her upset victory with Crowley. Look at this. So, older people tend to vote more. They tend to be more reliable voters. But look at what she was able to pull off. This was under 40. She was able to pull people to the polls that weren't necessarily part of the political process. In our presidential elections, I think like half of the country doesn't vote. And you ask this question of why half of the country doesn't vote. Half of the country doesn't vote because they don't believe that the people represent their interests. You had a president that said he was going to get hope and change. 20, 30% swung from the Democrat to the Republican in order to get Trump over the finish line. Those people weren't all racist and sexist. There was something else. There was another quality that they thought they were going to get that they didn't get. I would wager to you that that quality has something to do with economics. There's been a redrawing of the political space from the standpoint of the way people have been aligning themselves. And this interregnum hasn't necessarily settled yet, so it's hard to know where the political lines are going to be drawn. But she's not a problem. She's more of an asset. And they wouldn't be trying to rub themselves into Ocasio or Rokana or Sanders if these people were liabilities. No offense, but you clearly don't know what you're talking about. So, let's see. The Jack HQ. I laughed my ass off when I heard Sargon said the Democratic Socialists of America is against borders. Broadly speaking, damn right it's broad. Totally generalization. Toe. Yeah, it's beyond a generalization. He's making an argument against one person. And he's saying that these people, not to mention, he's like, I love the part where he says, now, that's not really in her platform, but it's in her soul. It's in her soul. It's what she believes when she gets out of bed in the morning. Even if she never utters a word, even if she never tells anybody, it's what she believes. And it's like, but why do you believe that's what she believes? Why? You admit that Bernie Sanders calls himself a socialist. He's not a socialist. Libertarians call themselves libertarians. And everywhere else in the world, they're not libertarians. And in this case, you have somebody who calls himself a Democratic Socialist of America. And again, you're assuming that she ascribes to each and every tenet as you broadly go for this attack, aiming at the tenets without necessarily even figuring out where she falls in the spectrum or how dedicated she even is to all of the tenets. I mean, this stuff is insane. yeah, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna keep going into it. I'm just saying that this was an extraordinarily weak piece by Sargon. And it's like, wow, he's just swinging at ghosts. He just really wanted to do a video about Ocasio. He really did. Let's see. Jamal, you know damn well that Abolish ICE movement is about open borders. Look, I don't know damn well anything. I know it's about abolishing ICE, and whether it's about abolishing borders, meaning all borders or not. It's a different question as to whether or not Ocasio-Cortez believes it. I mean, the whole premise of the argument that's taking place here is against her, not the broad generalizations of some people that may be in the movement. There may be some, I agree with you. There's going to be a percentage of people who want the extremes and say, I don't want any borders. And he even shows it. There's a clip where he shows people chanting, saying, no borders, no borders. Ocasio wasn't on that line chanting no borders. This is kind of my point, though. My goal in this is not to defend socialism. My goal is to defend her. And I'm making the case that there's a difference here between the generalizations that he put up, that he's attacking, versus the person. Versus the person. That's all. Venezuela hasn't a bloody chance because of the United States, so it's impossible to discuss until the records. Yeah, it is impossible to discuss what's taking place in Venezuela as if Venezuela is in a glass bubble all by itself. There is one of the strongest economies on the planet in economic warfare against Venezuela. Donald Trump at one point had asked his people about invading Venezuela. Why can't we just invade Venezuela? Yeah, come on. I mean, it's somewhat of a dishonest conversation to not take that into account when you're talking about Venezuela. Now, look, this is not to say that the government that's in power in Venezuela may not be corrupt. That's not to say that they don't have their issues. But also, into that, you also have to add this thing of economic warfare being waged against them. Let's see. So many want to cast themselves as middle class when they are working class. Yes. Pirate LX, I just got here, but Sargon is a dumbass. I don't know his other stuff, so I can't quote one way or the other on it. Why should I trust Vlad Lenin's psychology? I'm not actually to trust anybody's psychology. I mean, you can read his book and you can agree with him or disagree with him, but I do look. I do. I think it works to use the lens of various systems to see the world. Meaning, to not, I don't care what the ism is. I think the thing is, how do you accomplish what you want to accomplish in the society? All societies have defects. The question is, what are the defects you're willing to accept versus the ones you're not willing to accept? I guess my point is, you can look at these things through the lens. So you can look at capitalism through a Marxist lens, or you can look at the world through a Marxist lens, or Leninist, in this case, lens. Now, in your case, you're saying, why should you? Yeah, I don't have this thing of trying to get anybody to look at it through anything, but I do think people should be open to looking at things through various lenses to try to get a different appraisal of those systems. Oh yeah, that's right. They put those bankers in jail. I want to move to Iceland. Damn it! I got married in Iceland. Stable genius. My wife and I got married in Iceland. My keyboard is banged up, and so I feel like I'm missing something. But yeah, my wife and I got married in Iceland. Beautiful country, little to no poverty, cold. People are nice as can be. God, this video has diverged big time. I'll just edit this out afterwards. This was one of the waterfalls. After the wedding, I got my shoes on. We almost got, not necessarily lost, but we almost ran out of gas. It was, man, that day we got married, and then after we got married, we were in the car, and we didn't realize that in Iceland, it's not the same as in the States. They're not a lot of gas stations. This was about an hour outside of Reykjavik. And we had to do 2 of these. We did this one, and then when we got back home, my wife's mom demanded another wedding. So, but Iceland's nice. Yeah, they threw those bankers in prison. They threw them in prison. All right. I'm going to end this. I'm not going to keep this one long. I saw the video, and I'm like, look, you can attack Ocasio. If the attack is fair, fair enough. And people are going to have their different points of view from the standpoint of how they see her. So her saying occupation of Israel, to me, it seems like she wobbled when she backed away from that point. I don't think she should have wobbled. You have other people who say, oh my God, I can't believe she used the term occupation to describe an actual occupation. So I get that. The problem I have with this piece is it's not attacking her. It's not attacking her. It's attacking a ghost. So I'll leave this here. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. This one has gone a little bit long, but you have a good one. Thank you, Jack. I'll tell my wife you said so. Iceland's home of the Panama Papers. Now, I didn't know that. I did know they threw the bankers in prison, and that was awesome. I was like, God, you guys are awesome. It was easier to get married in Iceland than many of the other places. And so when we were looking at like France and all these other places, Iceland was cheap to get to, the most expensive place on the planet that I've ever been to. Britain was expensive when I went to travel to Britain. Britain couldn't light a candle to Iceland. We thought we were doing well because when we were in Greece, we was like, holy shit, this is so inexpensive. Our money is going, so far. And then we get to Iceland, it was like, oh my God. Every time it was time to get something to eat, we cringed because it always hurt. We were coming home one night from, I forget where we were coming from, but it was like outside of Reykjavik. And we stopped by KFC. Starving. We stopped by KFC. It's like 11 o'clock at night, but because it's Iceland, it's still look like it's like 6 o'clock. And soda, I think it was like chicken bites and fries. And my wife got something like I don't think it was wings or something, but whatever she got, it wasn't much. It was like $40. And that's like the standard everywhere we went. I think we ended up going to the mall and was able to get a sandwich for like $7. Best we can get. Everything else hurt. The day we got married, we splurged on a wedding meal where we went to this place. Now, we were trying to do this thing where we'd eat humanely raised. I cringe. It bugs me to eat animals that are tortured. And I understand that the animal is being killed anyway, but still, it bugs me to see the animal tortured. In the same way human beings don't like to have a shitty life, animals don't have a shitty life. So if, yes, even with humanely raised, the animal gets killed, well, someday you as a human being is also going to expire. It doesn't necessarily mean from the cradle to the grave you're going to want a shitty existence. I assume the same thing of that particular animal. But they had cows all over the place. Not all over the place, but they had... The food was humanely raised. There was a lot of farms. There was an area that we were in. I mean, farms all the way down the line. You would see not cattle, but like goats and stuff just kind of walking, moseying about on the mountainside. It's amazing to watch. We stop at a restaurant. They have a farm out back of the restaurant. You can hear like cows mooing and whatnot. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm getting a steak. I'm starving. I haven't had a good meal since I've been here. Everything is expensive, so not having a good meal makes it hurt that much worse because it's like I paid a bunch of money for something I didn't like. Fine, I'm getting a steak. Fuck it. My wife has to go back out to the car for something, and she comes back and she says, I think they're killing a cow. She said that cow was screaming its last death throes. And she was like, that's going to be the cow they're going to put on your sandwich. I was like, that is not the cow they put on my sandwich. But the place was amazing. One of the best things I've ever had in my life. I don't think it was that cow. God, I hope it wasn't that cow. I have a hard time believing they could cut that cow that fast. But she believed that they were murdering a cow out back. So, good morning, sweet progressives. Good morning back at you, Moni G. Now I'm getting hungry. Oh, God, that sounds so bad. They let all the bankers go after the release of the Panama Papers. No way. I did not know that. I didn't know that. Reconciliation. I'll support you when I get a job. Work hard to find for outspoken socialists. What? Outspoken socialists. It moved up. Damn, it moved up. Oh, I meant psychology. When Sargon wanted me to trust that Vlad was speaking truth when he says socialism leads to communism. Oh, I see. Well, it's not so much that it leads to it. It's the middle ground. The thought was that socialism was going to be this kind of intermediary between communism, that ultimately you would need one of the capitalist countries to, like, he didn't believe that there was enough development in the other countries in order for socialism to come about. In the underdeveloped countries, he thought it was going to take place in somewhere like Germany, one of the more developed capitalist countries, and that the best that they could do was be in a holding pattern. The thing is, an argument can be made that what took place in the Soviet Union wasn't necessarily communism; it was state capitalism, and you can make an argument that there's a difference. This idea of collectivism, where you have workers controlling the means of production, let's say through like guilds or workers at like kind of an anarchist organization strategy, is a little bit different than state owning the means of production. I agree with you that there can be a problem with bureaucracy in some of these systems in this way. I think the goal is to design your way out of the bureaucracy. It's not so much that Stalin did X, and so any attempt at trying to have a socialistic government is flawed. She starts off making this point of democratic being in the first part of it. In fact, even the definitions that he was reading was this idea of adding democracy and choice into the situation. In your regular work environment, you're in a totalitarian system. Your company, for the most part, is owned by one person, and that particular person, maybe he has a board, but ultimately a small group of people make the determinations that for everybody else that's in that company. And you can say, well, look, they were able to get the capital for the company and everything else. And so they own the company in which they can have this kind of totalitarian dictatorial regime. Well, democratic socialists, and I agree with them, will say that's not fair. I mean, yes, they may have started the company and everything else, but I am held to the decisions that are being made in this particular company. So if I am being held to the decisions, just like if you were in a government, maybe I should get a decision in the process, seeing I'm part of the process. Now, I would go one further than this. Now, unions end up in this process of fighting labor versus management. Get rid of the management. You can have workers owning the means of production. This is kind of what they mean by collectivism. Having workers and worker co-ops taking turns or coming up with this kind of structure that allowed them to dictate or govern the company itself. I don't understand this argument that this stuff goes into cronyism, but the top 1% are perfectly okay. I just find it to be a ludicrous argument. But I'll leave it here. Yeah, Sargon of Akkad, hit and swing and a miss. I'm not saying that all of his videos are crap, but this one was a magnificent straw man. I mean, Jesus Christ. If you're going to hit her, but hit her for something that she ascribes to, not necessarily this kind of straw man of something that you want her to ascribe to. There's a difference in those things. There's a big difference in those things. So I'm going to end it here. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. I've been up all night. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to do another show. I feel like since I'm right here, I might as well get my shows out of the way for the day before crashing. So that's probably what I end up doing. All right, I'll probably see you guys in a few. Thanks, everyone. And by the way, the Jack HQ. Thanks, man. I think you may be a new subscriber. I haven't seen you before. At the very least, I haven't seen you comment before. So thank you very much and welcome to the Soapbox. All right, guys. Have a good one.